This story happened to me when I was 15 years old, when I was a staff member at my summer camp in upstate New York. The end of summer camp is always a large celebration. We take advantage of no campers being on property to live it up for the last night of camp. The last is always one of joyous melancholy, where you simultaneously have a blast drinking with your best friends in the world, but you know you are about to barely see any of them for a whole nother year. During this summer, we replaced a large number of buildings in one of our subcamps, including the main camp's office building. The last night of camp, we made the biggest bonfire I've ever seen out of rubble from the office building. The fire was spread across the turnaround point in the center of camp. You couldn't get within 25 feet of the thing without feeling like your clothes would spontaneously burst into flames. The night was fun for the first few hours. People were laughing and drinking and taking pictures, posing in front of the huge bonfire. It was one of those rare times for 3 sub-camps that got together and socialized with one another. I was hanging out with some friends with the main subcamp. I was from the smaller subcamp, towards the front end of the property, probably a little over a mile away from where we are now. I was offered my first end of summer victory cigar, which we smoked happily as we stretched out on the ground. The cool summer night making the perfect complement to the roaring blaze that burned before us. As the clocks turned to midnight, the staff from my camp was preparing to go. Calls of "to the bus" ripped through the air, and all around me, my fellow staff got up to leave. However, the guys I was hanging out with asked me to come back to the campfire with them for a while before going back to my camp. Having never really had the chance to go hang out with these guys during the summer normally, I pleaded and eventually convinced my program director to let me stay for just a little bit longer, and I would walk back on my own. It took a bit of convincing, but eventually he agreed. The second campfire I went to was a lot of fun, but the only important part happened at the end. I was pulling on my sweatshirt to start my walk back, when one of my friends, we'll call him Dan, put a hand on my shoulder. "Hey man," he said slowly, "you sure you don't want to stay here tonight?" I shook my head. "It's not a long walk." "I know, but..." He trailed off into silence. He actually sounded kinda scared, so I turned back around. I was shocked to see worried faces staring back into mine, their features exaggerated by the light of the flames licking the air around them. I asked them what was wrong. They explained to me that strange things happen to people on the road at night. Tales of ghostly figures seen shimmering on the glass surfaces of the lake, strange whispering in their ears, footsteps of somebody who was walking directly behind them, but whenever they would stop and vanished, it would turn around. As they told me these tales, I felt a chill run down my spine, and an increasingly large part of me wanted to suddenly stay there, go back to my camp in the morning. Then it hit me. I was first-year staff. It was commonplace for older staff to pull pranks on the younger first years, and scaring the wits out of me like I was a scared little boy was one of those pranks. "I see what you're doing," I said, smiling. The feelings of fear drained out of my body as quickly as they had come. "But you're not going to scare me that easy." They protested, insisted they weren't joking. I was impressed at the levels they were willing to go to trick me. But at that point, I wasn't going to be convinced to stay. I wish I had listened to them. The camp road was a thin stretch of groomed gray gravel path. The silvery gray of the road almost seemed to glow in the moonlight, in contrast to the darkness of the gnarled forest on either side. To my left, The forest rose up into one of the mountains that surrounded our camp, and to the right, it dropped off a slight cliff into a copses of thick woods and swamp. The walk started off simple enough. I passed the sign to the archery range on my left. The first sign, I was leaving the main camp area. Next came the camp I turned around, where the fire had been. There were still a few stragglers by the now mostly smoking mountain of wood, making sure all the traces of it went out before they went to bed. I waved at them as I passed, but I'm not even sure they saw me. I didn't use a flashlight when I walked around camp normally. I preferred to just let my eyes adjust to the darkness. I walked past the turnaround. The road bent to my left, and the last vestiges of light were lost behind me to the endless, inky black of the woods. Pretty much as soon as I left the office fire behind, things started to get strange. Try as I might, I couldn't get out of my head the stories my friend told me about the camp road at night. The one that was particularly getting to me was the silent stalker, the spirit who would match your footsteps exactly. If you walked, he would walk. If you stopped, he would stop. If you turned around to face him, he would be behind you in the opposite direction. And if you ran, he would chase you. As I thought about the silent stalker, I could hear a second pair of footsteps behind me. They were close, so close to me, they could be breathing down my neck. My body tensed, and I fought to keep my growing fear down. The night was oddly silent. The normal creatures of the night had apparently vanished, replacing the sounds of the woods with an eerie silence. I picked up my pace, and my follower picked up the pace behind me. Somehow, as close as the footsteps had seemed before, they were even closer now. Any second I would be snatched and pulled into the forest by an unspeakable horror. Or, despite myself, I whirled around. There was nobody there, just the creepy pearly glow of the road stretched out before me. "Very funny, Dan," I called out, my voice echoing off the mountain to my right. Echoes off the mountain. That's all those second footsteps are. Just echoes off the mountain. Even though I knew it was a lie, it made me feel marginally better. At the same time, I decided the silent stalker would have to jog to stay up with me. As I jogged, the lake side of the road came up on my right. This made me feel slightly better, as the openness of the lake provided a good deal more light from the moon. It also meant that I was more than halfway back to my camp, so close to my bed and my friends, and away from this creepy dark road. I continued to hear my stalker behind me. I was doing my best to ignore him. But then, something changed. The footsteps behind me vanished, and instead, I hear the crunch of dead leaves to the woods on my left. Refusing to turn towards the sound, I kept my jog, as heavy footfalls in the woods to my left continued to pace with me. It was an animal. It was an echo. It was somebody trying to scare me. Every excuse in the book that prevented me from facing the truth was whirling around my mind at once. Screw jogging. I started to sprint now. The thing in the woods kept pace with me, running and running. I couldn't outrun it. It was going to get me, whatever it even was. As I sprinted, despite my mind screaming to the contrary, I whipped the flashlight out from my pocket and pointed it towards the woods on my left. There, larger than life, was a man. Or at least it looked like a man. To this day, I'm not sure. He was clad in a red and black flannel and blue jeans. His torso was faced completely towards me, as his huge arms swung from side to side, like large pendulums, as he ran alongside me. His face was wrong. It was splotchy, like it was melting. There were no discernible features, no eyes or nose or lips or anything. But the second I looked into his face, my blood turned to ice. My limbs suddenly failed me and turned to jelly. My knees buckled and I collapsed onto the road, flashlight spinning out of my hand, skidding across the road in front of me. I groaned in pain. I rolled over and felt warm blood from my knees and legs in my hands. Slowly, I staggered back to my feet, wincing with the pain in my knees. It was at this moment I felt a slight breeze. The next second, I realized I could hear the forest again. The chirping of crickets, the croaking of frogs, the hooting of owls. It didn't even realize how quiet the woods had been without these sounds. I scooped up my fallen flashlight and shone it again into the woods. The man, or whatever that thing was, had vanished. I asked my friends from the campfire the night before if they had played a trick on me. They swore up and down that they did not, and still swear that to this day. I've discovered many secrets of my camp in the last years I was staff there, but I don't think I will ever know exactly what it was I saw out in the woods that night.